I speak not this, that you should bear a good opinion of my knowledge, insomuch I say I know you are. Neither do I labour for a greater esteem than may some draw a little measure of what? What did I just say? Hi there, my name's Charlie Wright. Today I'm going to be analysing a monologue from As You Like It, which is performed by the character Rosalind, who is the female protagonist of the play. Bit of context, Rosalind has been forced to flee from court because her evil uncle Frederick has taken over, so she disguises herself as a man called Ganymede and takes refuge in the forest and meets Orlando, who is her love interest, but obviously is posing as Ganymede, and Orlando is desperately searching for Rosalind and is in love with her. And so Rosalind sort of says as Ganymede that he will fill in for her and pretend to be Rosalind. So there's that kind of dramatic irony as he's talking at Ganymede as he would for Rosalind, and it really is Rosalind. So there's lots of comedy there. The monologue is in Act 5, and Orlando has admitted that he can't continue playing a fantasy anymore. He can't keep pretending that Ganymede is Rosalind, and he needs to be with her and to sort of confess his love for her. So she proposes that if he really does love Rosalind, then tomorrow she will be able to summon Rosalind, because she is a magician, she has magic powers. He is a magician with magic powers. So it's a massive turning point in the play. It's not a traditional sort of Shakespearean section about femininity, but it's really interesting. Rosalind as Ganymede gets to subvert a lot of gender norms. She engages in lots of sort of male activities. Earlier in the play, she is seen to buy property, which is unheard of for a woman. And I think fleeing the forest offers her a lot of protection. I think any sort of dangerous men in the forest would be less likely to underestimate her if she was a man, because of the perceptions of the time. So it sort of shows that she has this kind of inherent power that she isn't really able to exercise because of her perception as a woman sometimes. And so it kind of allows her full power to blossom, and she is probably the greatest driving force in terms of plot in the play. She's just sorted out the love, I can't even say triangle. There's Sylvius, Phoebe, Ganymede, Rosalind and Orlando, this sort of love five-way thing which she's able to resolve all by herself. It's very she's the man. Okay, no, it's if you've seen it, which is a banging film, but to sort of put it more sort of on Shakespeare's level, something a bit more high art, probably Mulan. That's probably not hugely high art either, but you know, sort of that gender bending and being able to exercise more power because there's less sort of prejudice. And there's a massive kind of level of homoeroticism here, because it's me playing a woman disguised as a man, sort of projecting this romance with another man. So it's kind of man, woman, kind of woman, if that makes sense. There's a lot to unpack here. And it kind of creates a continuity, as all Shakespeare characters were played by men back in the 16th century. So it's a really interesting kind of link there. I think Shakespeare as well uses the kind of subterfuge and the dramatic irony and the comedy genre to pose some really interesting questions about gender and sexuality. That he kind of plays Trojan horse with it. It would be too avant-garde if this was a serious drama, and he kind of seriously played into that homoeroticism because of the deep sort of misogyny and homophobia, a lack of awareness of sort of gay people in those times. But it's very avant-garde. I think for me, as a sort of a gay man, I can kind of relate to that sort of hiding of your romantic intentions, sort of like when I was in the closet and sort of flirting with someone that I kind of fancied but could never say, and that's sort of what Rosalind is doing here. And I think definitely that would have been more true for any kind of homoerotic intentions that Shakespeare wrote. It would very much have to be quite underwritten. But as someone who's been out and isn't sort of isn't ashamed of her sexuality, I'm tempted to sort of play this as kind of comedically, like she's having fun doing it, rather than being sort of huge amounts of risks. I think the piece starts very strong. That's what grabs me. I will weary you then no longer with idle talking. That's how she opens. She kind of cuts the chit chat, saying, I'm not going to waste any more time talking. I think what sort of strikes me is that she speaks in prose, and she's the only character in the Troubadour series to speak in prose, which was associated with characters of a lesser class, and kind of reflects her status in the play at the minute. She's on the run from Frederick. She doesn't have the man that she wants. She's not where she wants to be yet. So her maleness kind of associates with that lower class, but still has a lot of agency, even more agency than she had as a woman in court, when she had a much higher status, which I think says a lot about gender and what was kind of permissible in Shakespearean eras. I think the next line's really interesting as well. Know of me then, for now I speak to some purpose, that I know you're a gentleman of good conceit. It's really funny because she's saying, I wouldn't lie to you, I know that you're an intelligent man. She's leading with honesty, but she's in a disguise and is playing him. It's kind of subverting and ridiculing that notion that, you know, men are always honest, they always speak from the heart, they're truthful, they're just inherently truthful, inherently good qualities. And she's playing around with that. It's almost kind of, I don't know if this is sort of mansplaining, but it's like this sort of like woman's view of a man's chat that he always gives, and is kind of serving it back to Orlando, which is quite funny. And I think the meter as well sort of plays into that, because with the sort of the way that the sentence changes and the apostrophes, the commas, sorry, it sort of plays into that kind of sense that she's almost sort of stumbling over herself to kind of say, oh no, like, I know you are intelligent. And so it just makes it more ironic. I speak not this that you should bear a good opinion of my knowledge, in so much I say I know you are. She's sort of building on this sort of subterfuge, and she's obviously sort of saying that men kind of say things when they don't mean it, and we should believe them because they're men. So it's almost kind of that criticism is sort of at me, and I'm reading it, and it's kind of funny and ironic because I'm sort of digging at myself. So if I play this as a man, she's playing me. And I think that kind of, in so much I say I know you are, could almost sort of be an aside to the audience, sort of a change of address, that she's kind of like lapping up how funny this is, and Orlando has no idea, potentially. That next line's really interesting as well. Neither do I labour for a greater esteem than may in some little measure draw a belief from you, to do yourself good and not to grace me. She's saying, I'm not doing this to boost my reputation either, because who wouldn't look on someone more fondly if they were to say how intelligent they are. Again, ironic. And it's funny because I think she sort of displays extreme emotional intelligence because she's seen the way that men argue and that they get people on side, and she's using it and she's manipulating it, and understands that I think men sometimes there's that, if you give them a bit of an ego stroke, they're probably a bit easier to comply and give you a bit more belief. And I mean, being brutally honest, yeah, I'd probably say that's a bit true of me. Maybe I am trash, but yeah, I think it's just some interesting perceptions she's really made. It's really interesting that this is written by a man as well. I think there's another kind of doubling down on the sort of gender bending here. I think the next line in the monologue is really important. Believe then, if you please, that I can do strange things. She's setting up the reveal that she's a magician, which is really, I think if this was a drama, this would be quite serious, especially if she was sort of presenting herself as a woman, in the sense that witchcraft, the fear of it was so rife in Shakespeare's writing that if she was to reveal that, she probably would have been put to death. Whereas she's disguised as a man here, and it's comedic, so there isn't that kind of sort of very gendered stigma. I think as a man, I can sort of play this probably from a point of safety. But even so, I think something really revealing is that it kind of speaks to how much of a driving force she is in this play. I think Orlando does a great job of saving Oliver from a lioness, but a lot of the male characters, they don't really do anything, especially Jacques, who is a melancholic with great lines, but just kind of sits and mopes around. The practicality and logic that she displays a lot in the play, and here her kind of sort of decisive sort of proposition, it's kind of at the time that sort of male notion of logic and practicality, which I think she is able to put forward here and sort of break down that this isn't necessarily inherently male thing and maybe it's actually kind of female, but she's allowed to sort of express it without stigma as a man. So again, it's a gender expectation subversion here. The next line's really interesting. I have since I was 3 years old conversed with a magician, most profound in his art and yet not damnable. Shakespeare kind of continues the comedy here because Rosalind spends the first half of this monologue saying, I wouldn't lie to you, you're clever, we all know you're clever, I'm not trying to make myself better at this either, and then says something as ridiculous as this, and I think it sort of shows that as long as you stroke someone's ego enough, you can say something absolutely ludicrous and they will believe you. So I think she sort of plays to the male ego very well. And then the next line, if you do love Rosalind, so near the heart as your gesture cries it out, when your brother marries Alina, shall you marry her? So here, she's saying, you know, if you really do love Rosalind, when your brother marries Alina, then you will marry her. And I think maybe some male audiences at the time might think this is kind of shrewish, she's being really dishonest, and she's lying about her identity, it's manipulative, but it's not, because this is coming from a really good place with great intentions, and that she's setting up their marriage here. She's spending this time getting to know him from the comfort of a disguise, and which will only help them out in the long run. And obviously I think there is this element of comedy, particularly now when the stakes are less high, yeah, she is enjoying this, it is funny, she is making a bit of a fool of him, but also she's setting up the rest of her life. Like, she's, oh my god, will he marry me, is this gonna work? Like, you've got to feel for her. It's a big moment. So the last line I think is really poignant. I know into what straits of fortune she is driven, and it is not impossible to me, if it appear not inconvenient to you, to set her before your eyes tomorrow, human as she is, and without any danger. It's, in a subtle and indirect way, she's basically proposing to him. She's setting up this marriage and saying that if you do love her, and I know that she is lost, but I can get her in front of you tomorrow unharmed for you to marry together. And for a woman to propose to a man in the Elizabethan era is completely controversial and unheard of. It is a man's thing to do. Marriage is a patriarchal institution, and just what is really ironic is her disguised as a man and as a magician and sort of indirectly setting up this marriage is somehow less radical than if she was to propose as Rosalind, as a woman, which is crazy. And I think that notion is being challenged now. I think more women are proposing, but I think it's still very much entrenched in patriarchy, that expectation that it's a man's job. I think that gay subtext is really interesting as well. She's posing as a man and kind of setting up this marriage, and then if I were to play this as a man and then as a gay man, that really ups the ante there. I think in at the time of Shakespeare's writing, it was very taboo, so obviously I could sort of play into sort of Rosalind's stakes of this is a huge moment for her, because it is kind of dangerous, but as an out gay man who isn't in the closet anymore and having to sort of pretend and sort of beat around the bush about my kind of identity and sexuality, and in a far more accepting environment than Shakespeare's day, I guess I could sort of play less into that interpretation and more something that is quite funny, and then also kind of like erotic and romantic and exciting, because this could be the rest of my life with a man. So there is also that reading. I think gender always has to be a part of Shakespeare's plays. I think we're confronting it as a construct rather than inherent qualities, which I think is something that Shakespeare is absolutely saying is true of Rosalind. She sort of has these supposedly masculine traits of practicality and problem solving and strength and leadership, and completely sort of is turning that on its head. And I think it's fun to experiment with having actors of different genders, but I think rather than make a sort of Shakespeare plays genderless, it just gives it even more experimentation and commentary and more variety and opportunities to discover. I will weary you then no longer with idle talking. Know of me then, for now, I speak to some purpose, that I know you are a gentleman of good conceit. I speak not this that you should bear a good opinion of my knowledge, insomuch I say I know you are, and neither do I labour for a greater esteem, that may in some little measure draw belief from you to do yourself good and not to grace me. Believe me then, if you please, that I can do strange things. I have, since I was 3 years old, conversed with a magician, most profound in his art, and yet not damnable. If you do love Rosalind, so near to your heart as your gesture cries it out, when your brother marries Alina, shall you marry her? I know into what straits of fortune she is driven, and it is not impossible to me, if it appear not inconvenient to you, to set her before your eyes tomorrow, as human as she is, without any danger.